And hello, welcome again to this crash course on the Banco. We are going to be dealing with chapter 3, that is Sidelines part 3. Those include a4 and knight d2. So we have so far considered queen c2, along with very, very rare lines, such as the move e4 there. Here on move 4, bishop g5, f3, and all those kinds of lines. Then we took a look at knight f3, and now it is time for a4 and knight d2. Both of them, yeah, just like, in the kind of a regular realm of popularity, it's a secondary, that's why they're called sidelines. But, you might encounter both. Actually, I've played a4 in my games before on the white side, along with a rook a2 idea later on. I will take a look at that as well in this chapter. So, actually, let us start with the move knight d2. And here, basically, we kind of detract from this paradigm of playing d4 to each and every sideline. Well, of course, there's just no way to play like that verbatim. We gotta be cognizant of White's tricks to try to gain some kind of a strategic edge. So in this particular case, we do actually take on c4. But let us take a look at what happens if we go ahead with b4. So a question mark here. a3 basically gives White an edge. This time the knight is out here on d2. And so, already it signals it's not going to be on c3. So b4 kind of loses its sting, or at least a substantial part of it. So you got to be flexible there. So let's see a3. Then g6, black, let's say tries to set up some kind of a position of the kind we've seen already. e4, queen c7 to stop e5, knight f3, bishop g7. Now after e5, black, I guess, would be content with knight g4. So bishop e2, yeah, and now let's say eventually, we break, take on a3, rook a3, d6, and let's say here is queen a4, basically, and along with queen a5, gives a very pleasant edge to White. It's a very, very different position from what we've seen on the, the first two chapters. Here, White is basically already like kind of developed here. He signaled early he doesn't want the knight on c3 anyway. The knight could go to e4 later. Then in the long run, he will try to play against our weak a pawn. Yeah, and this can be quite an unpleasant setup to basically play. So no b4 after knight d2. Try to remember that kind of slogan here. We basically go bc4 and e4. This is White's idea. This is basically the driving setup here related to this move knight d2. Well, what happens if knight c4, which, gets some kind of plausibility here. There's some logic to it, obviously. The knight is very often in these kinds of positions placed very, very well on c4, so why not here? Well, the problem is that we basically get our bishop to b7 here quickly, and White is forced to sack a pawn. We take that pawn, knight e2, g6. So now White is hoping for some activity. Well, we play our standard move d6. Now, no, there's no fork of queen a4 because the queen won't jump over its own knight here. So that basically doesn't make much sense. And there's no knight d6 discovery because we'll just recapture with a knight anyway. So h4. Queen e2, I guess, could be some kind of a tricky move. I didn't take a look at. I believe knight back to f6 is just good enough. No trade here, of course, because of queen d6. So that trick is not here. h4. White tries to grab some kind of play here in this particular game. Bishop g6, bishop g7, sorry. Now with bishop d3, we just go back. Queen b3, so White is really, really trying to actively place some kind of pressure here. But bishop a6, exclam, h5, and White just keeps going for it. And castle was much better for White in Chen versus Patil, Shenzhen 22-3. So, basically, White is out of tricks. There's no initiative, and we're even ahead in development. The king has not castled yet. So quite a comfortable position where, White's initiative just went astray early on. So that was basically bishop d3. If h5 right away. Oh yeah, there's basically just we go g5, yeah, in some kind of an unclear position. But h5 not scary either. So yeah, this basically knight c4, and I don't think it's just been played much outside of this particular game. So knight c4 is nothing to be afraid of, but just about everybody who plays, this move knight d2 will have another intention in mind, and that is the move e4. Here is where we have to be quite precise, to get the game going. e6, we have to play the move e6. So basically, the key is that we're taking advantage of the fact that we never really fired off the move g6, which is our usual Benko style development. So we actually can do this. We can play e6, putting extra pressure on the center, especially that now after the position has opened up a little bit here with the BC, this knight actually would be better placed on c3. So e6 has a tremendous strategic appeal, and we basically have to go for it. Now we'll have some kind of position which is a little bit resemblant of like Olapin in the Sicilian. I know, very, very far away from the Benko, but after DE, we go DE, and some of these positions have some kind of resemblance after this move bishop e7, to some lines in the Olapin, but it's a very decent version. Bishop e7. If e5 right away, then we go knight d5. Knight takes c4. Some white players could be attracted to this kind of a position. I mean, there's again, there's the weak pawn on here on c5, it's isolated, but it's again not that weak, so we have not much to be fearful of. Knight c6, knight f3, bishop e7. This usual kind of a maybe even French style of development allows us to basically get a very, very decent position, and actually even an edge. So a3 castles, bishop d3, and bishop a6. Very powerful play here by black. I like this bishop a6 move, which just like gets the initiative going. Castles, knight b6, b3, and queen c7 with a minor edge for black. So really great position, some sort of a dream of Olapin here. We have very easy moves ahead, like rook a d8, or rook fd8, some kind of a basic rook development. There's already a lot of pressure, and the d4 square also is ours. So in the long run, we could, imagine getting some sort of a very, very nice outpost here for one of our pieces, mainly knights. And well, it's not like a winning position, obviously. We'll still face some trouble here on the king side, where white has some space development, space advantage, like maybe rook e1, rook e4, rook g4, some kind of a long run rook lift idea. The bishop is unsure of where to go yet. Maybe b2 will be a good square, but if white can get some initiative on the king side, then perhaps bishop h6, if possible, could be even stronger. So we have something, to be looking out for, as white definitely will not sleep here. Also, h4, h5 looks like a typical idea. So basically kind of a race of plans here. Tough to say whose plan will be superior. But not e5, which is dubious objectively. Bishop c4, and this I guess is the more of a real deal. Bishop e7 and knight f3, and this position actually has some major sting for black. If black is not careful, then he might get in trouble. Bishop b7. Now let's say bishop b5. Now we have to be careful to place this knight on d7. Castles, castles, rook e1, and this is the key basically. We just get this kind of knight placement. I think it's optimal. We get this kind of an idea, or knight d4 as well, or knight b6, and then knight, perhaps knight goes to d4. So another type of position. Knight c4. So white is kind of keeping this option, this e5, maybe for later. Kind of like keeps black guessing as to what the actual intentions are, maybe trying to get knight d6. Yeah, so position that has a little bit of a maybe a little bit of a discomfort, but after the precise knight b6, bishop f4, white is trying hard. We trade the pieces, bishop c4, queen b6. Basically this is equality, so black kind of achieves the equal position here. Is ready to play rook fd8 or rook a d8, and then plays the knight on d4. And this position is, again, quite normal, quite fine, quite okay. Queen e2, castles, knight c6, e5, knight d7 exclam. So it's quite a comfortable square for the knight, now putting some pressure here. Rook e1, knight goes to b6, b3, queen c7, bishop b2, takes, and knight b4 exclam. And white is slightly, black is slightly better, actually. So basically the key is that this bishop, basically the reason what black managed to grab the white light square color bishop, and also has some kind of knight d5, knight 4 option. Yeah, but this bishop basically is the key, and yeah, this position is quite comfortable for black, to the point where it's even an advantage already, right? So like basically it's just difficult to imagine white getting the initiative going on the king side, in view of this fantastic bishop, maybe rook a d8 in the air. Yeah, so basically here, very, very good. And rook d1, so again, keeping some aggression in the air, queen c7, b3, so and now without e5, knight d4. This is the idea we've mentioned. Another way to grab equality here after this exchange, bishop b2, and now bishop goes to d6, putting additional pressure on the h2 pawn this time. And so now this really great piece play. We'll see this in also in the future chapters. This sort of a position where basically white has his pawn formation in this particular fashion. Black is basically counterplaying with the minor pieces, and yeah, trying to get some kind of a active initiative. And so again, a comfortable position, which also is a little bit reminiscent of the Tarrasch of French defense, some variations, in the c5 line, knight e2 c5, where there's kind of this kind of dynamics. So let's see h3, and basically e5, and that is equality. So again, a position without many problems here, but we gotta be a little bit careful. There's some pluses and minuses. We got this passer, but white may have a 2-against-1 in some kind of a deeper version of this position. Maybe in some endgame this can be quite unpleasant to face. So those were these moves here, rook d1 as well as e5, and we've considered both of them. And basically that is this move d6 on move 6 here, which again is not the most scary, and we should be able to kind of fend it off easily. Yeah, bishop c4 is perhaps the main way to play. This is the other way to play. So white is trying to keep the tension in the center, inviting ed, and d6. And the first thing to basically remember here is we'll be quite happy to get the bishop through e7. Now, this is far from the usual way of developing this bishop in the Benko. Obviously, this is the standard. The fianchetto probably happens in more than 95% of the Benko positions. So you got to be flexible in this particular case. So that's perhaps the what white is hoping for. We kind of habitually go here, and there's a queen e2 move, and this kind of trade or getting the king discastled, that can lead to some problems. But we basically go bishop e7, castles, and castles, and this is the position, which is equal in itself, but it is a little bit different than the usual. So there's some kind of poison in that fact itself, that white may try to trick us by getting it into an unfamiliar territory. So we're going to have some familiarity of this position, obviously. Now let's say how white may continue. Usually that will involve b3 at some point, whether right away or a little bit delayed. But yeah, this plan is kind of standard to this position. Now, especially that this bishop is not on this long diagonal, white will try to exploit that and basically play against us here on this diagonal himself. Well, let's start at knight g3, another logical move. And knight bd7 and knight f5. So we're kind of okay with getting this bishop trade in this particular case. We did save the tempo on development. That was the point. So now it's in a passive position. Trading it off is not the worst thing in the world. We basically go knight b6, and we put our chips onto activity on the queen side, coupled with some pressure onto the d5 pawn and on this bishop. So bishop b7 is in the air. It's maybe not the easiest way to play here for white, even though he can grab this bishop. Queen e7, rook e1, gaining a tempo, but we just basically politely go to d7, and this position again is totally fine. b3, white is trying to get something here out of this position again, and that's related to this idea. But we got bishop b7, bishop b2, knight fd5, bishop f1, rook a e8, and here is again, there's some compensation for white, but not much. Yeah, so the position is quite decent. Let's say he doesn't take it, and he goes to e3. So this basically, the point being like he remaneuvers it to grab this active e3 position for the knight. So then actually the knight on e3 is quite often really good. It controls the most important squares in the position. So, facing this knight could be a little bit troublesome, but fortunately we got the usual pressure on this d5 pawn, bishop b7, queen f3, knight fd7, b3, knight e5, queen f5. Now we kick the queen out of there. Queen c2, f5, with a very unclear position, but a nice position nonetheless. Our bishop this time is coming back to this diagonal where it usually belongs. And yeah, we get some really excellent play in the center. Also we have the standard pressure, but white also is okay here. Don't get me wrong. Again, we're not winning here by any means. We can try to play f4 and bishop f5 if we are allowed to. Maybe that would be like a way to gain an edge here. But for now, like this position is quite okay. So yeah, f5, unclear position here as well. That was one option, the move knight g3. Now the more popular option is the move b3 right away. Keeping the options for this knight, which may come here, or also, again on g3. But, keeping this in the air still. And we have the standard way, knight bd7. This is something to remember. Bishop b2 and knight b6 with great counterplay here. Let's see, knight g3. This time, of course, a mistake. We'll just grab the pawn. So two ways to defend this d5 pawn are the two knight moves, knight c3 or knight to f4. Let us start with knight c3. We take knight c4 and bishop a6. And equal position, one like kind of a claim for advantage for white could be, establishing these two pawns over these two pawns, basically, in this kind of position when we trade this off, and maybe some endings could be better due to the space advantage. But of course, for a somewhat perhaps weak d6 pawn, white will also struggle in some cases with the c4 equivalent. So queen d3, knight g4, knight e4, f5, knight ed2. So remaneuver to bolster this central positioning of these knights. But we have bishop f6. We trade off the white monster here. Bishop f6, queen f6, rook e1, and knight to the most logical square. Queen c3, and basically we trade this off. Yeah, this is what I was talking about. Then, it may visually look like white is just this crucial step ahead. He has the more space, and also now seizes this file first. But actually, even here, we're fine. We'll just grab the other file, and now this is the key, and we get equality all the same. And this will most likely, peter out to a basically totally drawn rook ending. So, we don't face much trouble here in this line either. It brings us to knight g3. Oh, sorry, to knight f4. Now knight g4, and a couple ways to play with the white color. Knight e6 looks a little bit scary, but we take and play e5. And again, we're fine. So we're locking this, the impact of this bishop from b2. And, queen at e2, knight c4, a5, with very unclear position. So yet another type of position, maybe with some kind of an old Benoni style pawn structure, but far from there. We are equal here again. A4 idea, bishop a6. Basically, black gets some nice play this time with this light square bishop, which doesn't have his counterpart on the board. So knight e6, not scary at all. h3, bishop f6. If queen c2, we take, and go with the knight to e5 with perfect equality. Again, h3, bishop f6, and now bishop takes on f6. We take with the knight because it's threatened. Queen f3, knight takes c4, bc4, and queen a5, active placement, bothering the knight a little bit. Knight b3 would be really terrible strategically. Knight kind of going against the wind here. It would play some kind of a careful queen a3, and black would probably be even better, or queen a4, jumping on the pawn here. So knight e4 is kind of forced, takes, and queen back to d8, just to consolidate, not let the white queen on e7, and black again will be totally fine here. There's this d6 weakness, but there's just no way to get to it realistically. Knight h5, queen g5, knight g3, and f5 with unclear / equal position. Again, we're fine. So, these positions are like basically you gotta be quite good strategically to handle this. There's just not that much tactics. It's more like positional understanding that will kind of give the upper hand to a player here. Can be won, can be lost. Probably most likely result is draw. But actually it's very far from just shaking hands here. So you gotta have like a whole bunch of strategical skills to be able to handle this kind of position correctly. And now finally, knight e4, perhaps like one of the more active tries here. Now we go very active f5. If knight g3, knight c4, bc, rook b8 first, and then, of course, bishop f6, the usual neutralization strategy. Takes, series of exchanges, and another equal ending results. But we need, again, some care. Knight e6, we pretty much have to take this. Take, and importantly g6. Now white realizes that his knight is kind of off, takes too much time to remaneuver, and this pawn is probably more of a weakness, so white trying to trade this early. h3, knight e5 takes, rook d5, trying to get, be a little bit ahead here. Knight d7, I guess, is the more precise way. Probably knight c4 also is fine, not sure why not. But anyway, kind of a very equal ending. This knight probably should already be on a more active square like f4, g5. But yeah, here is just really out of play. So no problems here either. And knight d2, the other way. Now I like this move, bishop g5. Basically forcing this knight to this and this position, where we take on c4, bc4. Now we trade this off, and we basically go after this e6 pawn yet again. Knight f3 takes, rook e1, knight e5 with very unclear position. And if knight takes c4 instead, now d5, h3, and this series of exchanges again leads to like the position drying up a little bit. Queen e2 is a sneaky move, trying to get some kind of play. Queen e7, rook f1, white's kind of all in here. Rook f5, but we have a way to basically just play simple bishop f6, and this should be a draw as well. Some kind of a drawn rook ending. ab3, equal position. It's equal pawns. Both structures are a little bit troublesome. Maybe black has the worst structure, but this e6 pawn perhaps will be weaker. After rook e8, king is safe enough after at h8. So yeah, so this position again is totally fine. That was basically this final try here on move 13 by white. Knight e4, f5, and black still gets the necessary counterplay. And that was again the move b3 here on move 10, which is the main alternative to the move knight g3, and something you see the most often here. We have considered it relatively deeply. So just to kind of again stress the most important point is we go through e7 in this particular version. And yes, that is the story of knight d2. Now we are off to the move a4, which, like I've said, Actually, I have even tried this with white. It's it's in a normal equal position with some kind of a plan, which is pretty much all you need these days. And then, queen a5 is one option, but I do recommend b4. Don't get me wrong. This interesting queen a5 try kind of tempting this move, because now bc is basically better for black. Very good version of this kind of position. But white will most likely not do that. Knight c3 and back to b1 is actually interesting with d6 equality. Kind of, you can argue the queen is just completely misplaced on a5. And also bishop d2, now b4. Now you can argue the bishop is misplaced, but so is the queen. So it's kind of an argument of which piece is worse. So they're kind of a tricky, interesting move that I've seen on one occasion. That's why I'm kind of sharing it here. But don't get me wrong again, b4 is my recommendation. And now g3 or knight d2. b3, g6, now b3, g7. And now I actually played rook e2 here at one point, I think over 15 years ago with success. But I think the best way for black here is knight e4. Trying to get the knight to c3, with possibly devastating effect. Queen d3 and f5. g2 d6. Yeah, and dynamically this position is just very good. So there's no way to do this fe queen e4 because bishop f5 basically skewering and getting the knight for free. So this is really not an option. Knight h3, castles, knight f4, and queen e8. A little bit like Dutch, actually. Looks actually very much like Dutch. Some kind of a sideline of the Dutch defense. Queen e8. So yeah, maybe some intra-discipline knowledge would be very welcome in this kind of a position, but not necessary. Position is very comfortable by itself. Queen f7, knight d2, and queen f6. Queen c2, kind of putting discomfort down this diagonal, this time by the queen. Not obvious at all where this rook should go. Yeah, so basically this position also very, very comfortable. Queen c2, knight c3, knight b1. Now we probably don't want to trade it. Knight e4. Now I consider, let's say white is trying to play for a win. We develop the other knight. If h5, note, of course, we have g5. Now rook b8. Now of course, these trades are not scary at all. We'll just go bc3, go knight b4, and probably even get to a winning kind of position. So white has to be more careful here. e3, bishop d7, castles, h6 with equality, although very, very dynamic kind of equality here. But yeah, I really like this idea knight e4 because of this incredible placement of the knight on c3, from which it's very tempting to get captured, but then knight goes to b4. There's this open file, and there will be an incredible Benko style compensation down the b file, which we see all the time, including in the future chapters. So yeah, basically this position is so comfortable. This rook a2 move is just not all that scary. It's not scary at all. So again, knight e4. Probably basically the point is to play to first of all avoid this any kind of annoying jump, discovering the bishop to hit the rook. And the point is to play bishop g2, e4, and then knight, let's say h3 or knight f3, castles, rook e1, rook e2. That's what I accomplished in that game, and it was quite successful. But my opponent didn't basically choose the best possible idea there. So yeah, but rook a2, obviously again, objectively is just not that great. Yeah, in this particular variation, and I like that I like quite a bit. I think black is more than good. Note sometimes in these kinds of positions we got g5, queen g6 ideas as well. Again, taken from the Dutch defense. And also the main thing, that is bishop b2, castles, bishop g2, double fianchetto, d6, now knight d2, but simple play, bishop b7, knight gf3, and e6, basically with very much equal position, nothing to be afraid of here. Another Benoni style kind of position, and black is very, very comfortable. Of course, white will have to do his best not to have to capture this, as that can lead to just too much comfort for black because of these two pawns so nicely controlling all these central squares here. So that was g3, g6 here, and we have considered both of these options. And all that's left is, I guess, the main move, and that is the move knight d2. We have a relatively brief consideration. This is, again, not scary at all here. And now we go back to our usual setup with g6. So g6, e4, and d6. We do not want to allow e5, b3, bishop g7, bishop b2, castles. So of course we've seen, more than enough of this kind of setup already. But again, let's just go just a tiny bit deeper here. We have a few options: f4, then e5 is exclaimed. So f4 just kind of bad, like white is undeveloped on the king side, black is perfectly developed, and this move just runs into e5, which is not the most obvious of moves. You kind of need to know it to play it, because after fe there's knight g4, right, with big advantage. Yeah, so f4 kind of an unlucky move here, just running into too many problems. If g3, then of course we take, and then there's this kind of move in the air. I don't know what the move exactly. I think knight h5. Yeah, oh yeah, this will be devastating to black. The trade, discovering the bishop, queen h4. Oh, this looks like really, really terrible for white. So, so f4, very, very unlucky move here for white. That is why h3, more of a reasonable try. And I like this trade-off idea, knight g7, queen c2, and now we'll use our, development advantage. e6, knight f3. Now queen f6 is the point, hitting on the rook, and after rook d1, we go to e7. Of course, we try to go ed and then f5, put discomfort on the e4 pawn, and that is related to the fact that king is gonna be the pawn is gonna be pinned. Bishop d3, f5, actually right away, even better, even stronger here, putting some pressure, like maybe idea like fe and this, or f4. So a lot of nice ideas here. And if castles, we basically are quite happy with this perpetual, but we can also play f5, interesting move, and play this kind of position. I think there's some game here, if I remember correctly. Like we're up a pawn, but we give two back because they're probably going to be falling. We sacrifice them for structure, and this knight f5 caught. Very active ideas here. G1 knight g3, rook g1 knight a6, going to b4. Yeah, just fantastic compensation for the pawn. Note how artificially placed the white pieces are, and in the meantime, black pieces are just so active. This is a beautiful position. Take knight f1, a6, and this is basically compensation for the pawn, which is undeniable here. Yeah, so this is very, very comfortable, again, setup. So that's if we really badly need to win the game. But yeah, I like this idea, queen f6 and or f5. And bishop d3, the main try, I guess the most logical option, e6, queen c2. Now knight bd7, knight g to f3, and knight h5, another equality. So this, position type we've seen quite a bit. With keeping the tension, d6 is not scary. You just go fe, queen e7, get all these squares. Now we're trying to jump to f4. We, of course, don't mind the trade of these bishops. We can also try to play through f5. So there's a myriad of ways, to play this kind of position. We're not afraid of any counterplay on the queen side. White, white basically has forgone the opportunity to go a3, ab, placing any pressure on the a file. And we're not afraid of a5, a6, just kind of a very quixotic anti-positional way to play here. Like, what is white even trying to do there? So basically the center partially locked, mostly king side and the king side part of the center are what's going to decide the game ahead. It is an equal position. It's both sided chances here. So yeah, basically, another type. This basically, yeah, kind of resemblant of what we've seen already, and the standard play that needs experience to build up to kind of handle these kinds of positions comfortably. But that's essentially the story of these two options. On move 4, again, in chapter 3, Sidelines part 3 here, and we have considered the move for a4, as well as for knight d2. So thank you very much for your attention. This was Grandmaster Stopa again, and we'll be off for chapter 4, where we do start considering this cb5 option.